Once upon a time, I was in a girl gang called the Austin Kraft Mafia. Our weapons of choice were hot glue guns, paintbrushes, and delicate bird-shaped scissors. I know, it sounds really nefarious, right? We all went by names like Hot Pink Pistol or Sparkle Craft. Years later, some of us are still crafty, and some of us are still going by names like Sublime Stitching. Guys, my name is Jennifer Perkins, and this is the Creative Queso Podcast. I'm no longer a card-carrying member of the Naughty Secretary Club, but I will always have a crazy amount of love and respect for my fellow Austin Kraft Mafia members. Today, I invite you to listen in as I catch up with one of my fellow mafiosos, Jenny Hart of Sublime Stitching. Jenny and her embroidery patterns single-handedly revived a once-forgotten handicraft and made it cool. Not just cool, edgy, interesting, and artistic. Jenny has partnered with companies like Citizens of Humanity and Restoration Hardware, created embroidery patterns from artists like Gemma Carell and Mary Blair. Plus, her own embroidered works are in the permanent collection at the Smithsonian. Mic drop. Jenny is one of the most savvy business owners I have ever met in my life, and I've met a lot of them. When she gives advice, you take it. Lucky for you, this podcast has about an hour of us discussing conscious decisions not to scale, copyright infringement, art licensing, and brand collaborations, plus a whole bunch of other fun stuff, like who remember the glitter boards in Craftster, ads in the back of Bus Magazine, and life before Etsy. All right, Jenny, I am excited to chat with you.
I am excited to chat with you. And again, so soon after seeing you.
I know, right? It's like a double whammy, like twice in a 6-month period. It's like a Christmas miracle.
It's been wonderful. It's been great.
I know. I'm so excited. So, as I said in the intro, you and I go back a long way, even though we've only got to chat twice in the last 6 months. There was a time where we were joined at the hip via the Austin Kraft Mafia.
Yes, we were. And I was thinking about it today. Do you remember where the first place was where we had our meeting?
The one like with Yumi and Tina?
Yeah.
It was like a coffee shop on like North Loop or something, wasn't it? Like, was it Flight Path?
It was Flight Path.
See, I still have my memory.
Our memory is intact. Yes.
Right.
And I actually came across photos the other day of that first, we weren't calling it Austin Kraft Mafia yet, but that first event that we had at Blue Velvet, when Blue Velvet was on the drag down by...
oh, yeah.
Yeah. So anyway, good times. Memories.
I know, right? And Blue Velvet is still around. Now she's on North Loop.
Oh, yeah, that's right. I follow her on Instagram.
Oh, you do? Oh,
yeah,
I need to go.
I love her.
I need to go by and see her and reminisce. Well, speaking of the Austin Kraft Mafia, right now it's like such a hot topic to talk about community over competition and rising tides, lifting all boats. How do you think that Austin Kraft Mafia contributed to the initial success of Sublime Stitching? Not that obviously Sublime Stitching probably contributed to a lot of our success more than the other way around, but what do you think about that, the community aspect?
Oh, well, I mean, I don't know about that. That's a nice thing to say. I think one of the most impactful things was, we all talked about one another. We were constantly cross-promoting. And, Yumi and Tina used to share ad space when I was doing so much print advertising. And I think that was really impactful. I think just such a visible group of people as a collective generates a lot of interest. I think because there's a cohesiveness to what we were doing, and it gave a face to what was happening across the country in a wider way. So I think, there's so many things that are at that time period, and I'm talking, like around 2000, 2001, even a little earlier, where it was just this incredible convergence of, people doing things across the country, with alternative crafts and really getting into handcrafting and making by hand. And then for me, from my point of view, going, well, who can I reach out to that's here? And it was both that, I found Tina Sparkles, and I was like, I really like what she's doing. I think this is really interesting. And I couldn't believe she was in Austin. I was like, oh, well, I want to have coffee with her. And then she said, let me bring you along. But I think, as you know, it was a way for us to bounce ideas off one another, which for me is really important. Like, I really need people that I can talk to and say, I'm thinking of doing this. Do you think that's a good idea? And I'm also a big believer in being very careful who those people are that you pick to listen to, because everybody wants to tell you what to do, and not everybody has best, most valuable advice or input. But I think I really liked that we had a way to communicate with one another, bounce ideas off one another before we put them out in the world. I liked the way that we did cross promotion, which I think was the really huge thing. And then doing events, once people kind of knew who we were as a group. And then, Stitch was, so successful. And we had the Babes in Business group, which I really liked. And just to explain, Babes in Business was because Austin Kraft Mafia was not open to membership. But we didn't want people to feel like they couldn't, it wasn't supposed to be like, you're not part of our club. It just was this, group of people that came.
It was more of a mastermind group looking back on it.
Yeah.
Almost, which are usually small groups.
That's right. And then, being able to facilitate groups in other cities, start their own, saying, yes, you can call yourself Kraft Mafia. We only ask that you, are officially tied into our website so that we can tell people about you. And then Babes in Business, which was just an open coffee, anybody who wants to come by to talk shop or make local contacts, give out cards, and somebody from the Kraft Mafia group will always be there. I loved that. I thought that was that was one of my favorite things. But it just, I don't know. What was your question?
No, you answered it perfectly. Just
endlessly about the Kraft Mafia for 5 minutes.
I know. We could just wax poetic for days. No, you totally answered it. That was my question about, kind of telling the story of how our community kind of helped all of our businesses and behooved us in that way. Do you have, because I don't here anymore. And like you said, there is something so magical about that, like tight group of friends we had that were in that industry that we could bounce those ideas off of. And I think in a way for me, that's why I started the podcast. So I can have these little like mini mastermind conversations. I was like feeling this like business ache, like, man, I miss those conversations. But do you have like a community like that in Los Angeles? Is there like a place that you go, or do you have like an online group, or are you just like me, like sad and alone and need to start your own podcast?
Jen, how are you doing? Are you okay? I'm happy to be here with you today. You're loved. You know that?
I just need friends in my closet is what I need.
Well, there's a couple of things. I do have people. I have wonderful friends. I've been very fortunate. And part of that is also due to the fact that I traveled so much out of Austin. So there are people that I knew before I moved here that I had made, established relationships with through Renegade Craft Fair, or times that I traveled out here and gone to shops and done workshops and met people. And I would say now that my getting together actually ends up being more focused on my fine art work with other artists and talking about that than my business as much. And I think in a way it's because, this is the 18th year of Sublime Stitching. And I feel less like I have other businesses that I can, how do I say this, that are like mine? Like, I don't know another business that is at the same time as small and as established as mine is. So I don't really have like, I see communities is more like, I'm more aware of the newer communities. And I'm part of a small chat group on Instagram right now with embroidery designers. And admittedly, I'm not very active in it. I'm kind of at a saturation point with how many things I can pay attention to online. But I really appreciate being involved in it because I'm genuinely interested in what their concerns are and what they're dealing with and what their questions are. Because I see them coming up against a lot of the same questions we had. And if there's anything that I feel like I might be able to be helpful with, I'd like to, jump in and get my 2 cents. And so I feel like the communities like you're talking about, like We Forged, are happening in different spaces, and there's so many more of them now.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not very active on Facebook or in private. I think there's a lot more private communities where people say, we're going to kind of handpick 20 people that I like. And, but I think I made a really conscious decision a few years ago to really put my head down, and really focus hard on my business. So I've put less energy into, I think what I'm trying to say is I've taken those tools that I've gotten from it, benefiting from being part of a robust community, and it's set in motion, and I'm kind of in a different place right now with it. So, I'm more interested in making myself available to people that have questions.
As a mentor.
Yeah, but at the same time, there's only so much time that I have. I get a lot of emails from people saying, I'm coming to LA. I'd love to meet with you and pick your brain. And I as much as I wish I could say yes to all of those, I can't. My time is, I'm pretty greedy with my time. So
as you should be,
and it's, and the other side of it is, and this is good. This is just the hard truth, Jennifer, is a lot of people that come to me. Here's the straight talk. It's a lot of people that
give it to me
and want advice. They don't want to hear the advice that I have to give them. It's not what they're expecting, maybe, or it's not, and it's not. It's hard. It's not, and I don't want this to make it sound like I tell them it's not going to work. It's more like, well, actually, I think this is the issue, and this is how I would go about it, or this is how I addressed it. And I can just see them gloss over, and it's like, yeah, I don't really want to do that. And then I'm like, okay, it's something I've done for 5 years, and like this one specific problem, I've addressed it this way, and it's just it's an eye-watering amount of work. That's just kind of the bottom line of it, is it's just very challenging. And I think there's kind of an unfortunate expectation. I mean, nobody's more impatient than I am, that people think it's going to just happen overnight.
Yeah, there's not a success pill.
Right. And I think Instagram in particular, where people, like overnight, they'll have 50,000 followers. It's like 300,000 followers is now the new 10,000 followers.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like there's this urgency that they want to tie that immediately into it being a stable ground for their business. And I think that's really tricky. I think that is something to be really cautious about. I've always been really, really always had a plan B. I always didn't want to build my expectations or the, be on a platform that I didn't control. That's always been really, really important to me. It's like, if I can get exposure through Instagram and get a lot of followers and a lot of engagement, that's great. But I have to know every day that Instagram controls that platform, period.
Yeah. Well, you and I have lived through the MySpace debacle. I mean, remember, I've said it before, but it's like they thought Naughty Secretary Club was a porn site and blocked it when that was my number. Yeah, that was my number one referrer. So you and I have been around long enough to learn that lesson of like, don't build all your hopes and dreams on a social media platform, because
you can't trust it. I mean,
no, it's like, don't build your house on rented property, because
that's right. And I know that I really feel for people who've gotten a huge following. I don't blame them. I would too, of like, how do I monetize this? And the thing that I found, for my business is it, I don't know how, if you find the same thing, but it's the newsletters. It's just been a newsletter list and years of building an established, trusting, happy career. And that takes time.
Yeah. And you've got an 18-year-long customer list.
Yeah. And the thing is, at the same time, I want new customers. Believe me, I revere and adore my longtime Sublime Stitchers, and they're wonderful, and they write me, and I'm always so happy when they write and say, I've been following you and stitching with your patterns since 2003 or longer. And it's really, really, it's very touching to me. And at the same time, I'm really focused on making sure that I get new customers. It's been nice, though, because that's been kind of built in, because now I'm getting daughters that grew up, I can't believe it, but that grew up with their mother or their dad. Most often it's their mothers, doing this with them. And that's been really nice. That's been something I dreamed about, like one day I thought, oh, it'd be so nice if that happened. But now here I am, and it's starting to happen. It's really
nice. It is. Tallulah has done a Tuesday Bassin embroidery pattern.
Oh, awesome.
Yeah, so it's definitely become generational. And, speaking of, this kind of segues into another question, getting new customers and all that. One of the things that you've done that I've always thought was so smart is you have worked with other artists who have completely different followings than you do. And then once they have a pattern like Tuesday Bassin or My Paper Crane, and then once they have a pattern with you, then those people are sending their fan base over to Sublime Stitching, or what is her name? Tara McPherson. Am I saying that right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Tara McPherson. Yeah.
Yeah. So you've always been so smart with partnering with other artists as well to bring in their community to Sublime Stitching.
I think I think that, I feel like collaborations have been, of all companies have been, it seems like that's become much more of a staple in the last 10 years, maybe. You just see everybody does collaborations. I'm not saying that has anything to do with me, and where my collaborations came from was I'm a huge comics fan. I grew up, reading countercultural comics, Fantagraphics, and just loving art and illustration and cartoons, and comics of all kinds. And I loved the marriage of embroidery and drawing, because at its heart, embroidery, for me, it's about the drawing at the basis of it. And then I loved the idea of taking this artwork that I enjoyed and seeing it embroidered, seeing it translated in embroidery was really exciting. And I'm just a fan. And it was a great way for me to approach artists that I admired, both established and well-known artists and also emerging artists. So I really love that. And you're absolutely right. That was an aspect of it as well, of going, I want to get my work in front of their audience that would never find me otherwise. And also to people that come to me as embroiderers who maybe aren't familiar with Jim Woodring's work, or Aaron Paisley, and get them turned on to their work. So I really, I liked all angles of it. And
yeah, no, it's a good 2-for-1 special. And you've done such an amazing job of curating really great artists. It's not like you're necessarily going for like the biggest, most popular. I mean, you have a distinct style and taste preference, and you've stuck true to that. And I love all the ones that you've chosen.
Thank you. They're just, it's what I love. I get, people will write me all the time, and I really appreciate it. I love it when people suggest artists, and I love it when people say, I really like this person's work. And the truth is that I have my list pretty far in advance of who I'd like to work with, but I look at everyone that people suggest. Every time people suggest it, I always check it out. And half the time I'm like, I'm dropping everything and I want to do it. I'm endlessly excitable. And I have
like sparkling thing.
I have to take a step back and say, you already have 4 projects going right now. You need to tie those up first. But yeah, I really, really love, I'm really proud of the stable of artists that I've got so far. I'd like more. I'm still looking, because I know there's a lot of artists that actually, there was an interview I listened. Who did I listen to? Your interview with Andrea Pippin,
Yeah.
and I really like her work.
I love her stuff.
And then I went down a rabbit hole of looking at her Instagram and people she follows, and it's funny because I've actually been focusing so heavy on doing patterns of other artists' work that I haven't done a lot of my own patterns.
I was gonna ask you that. Like, what was the last pattern that you did? Like the hairstyle one, or?
I did one actually because I was pouting about it. I was like, I'm going to do a new pattern just like that, and it was it's called Mysterious Guest, and it's the black cat in flowers.
Oh, I love that guy. I saw him.
Thank you. So that's one that I drew, and it's funny because I approached doing the pattern design a couple of different ways, where it's either an artist that I'm working with, and I'm interpreting their work as an embroidery pattern. Natalie Latte is a great example. I wanted to work with Natalie Latte, who's a French artist illustrator, primarily works in paint, as embroidery patterns. And that was going to be a real challenge because it wasn't really obvious how you would translate her work into contour lines for an embroidery pattern. So I've been really happy with that. So I either work with artists in that capacity, or I'm designing something that I know my customer would want. And so it's not just my free for all creative, like this is a Jenny Hart pattern. It's just whatever I felt like doing. It's me taking a theme and interpreting it for an embroidery pattern, mindful of what my customer would want, what I think looks good, what I think makes a good embroidery pattern. And then the cat pattern is more something like out of my sketchbook. So, and I would actually like to get to doing more of those because that's kind of why, I think all of us start doing this is we like all of these things if we're lucky, but at its heart, we hope that it's our creative impulses that will feed our business and be something that other people enjoy as well.
Yeah, I mean, all your guest artists are great, but don't you forget who put Sublime Stitching on the map, lady. It's you.
Oh.
You and your beautiful art. I just wondered, I knew you'd been working with more artists than you had yourself, and I just thought maybe you were focusing more on your fine art, and that was kind of what you were using as your creative outlet as opposed to patterns.
I think that's as you were sitting here, I'm not kidding. I was sitting here going, who's she going to say put it on the map? Who was it?
Who am I going to what? Say that again?
I was honestly sitting here waiting to hear who you were going to say put it on the map. Like, who helped me in the biggest way possible? And I didn't even realize
You did, duh.
Yeah, I didn't. Well, that's very nice. I am really focused on my fine art right now, and in a way that I wasn't before. Since Sublime Stitching started, one of the things that I've been really, really fortunate to do is do special projects. And by special projects, I mean commercial illustration projects. Like I did a book cover, or I did a portrait for an ESPN commercial, or some of the clothing collaborations that I've done. And they're fantastic. It's given me this great opportunity to work in a lot of different media, work with some fantastic art directors, do things that I wouldn't have been able to do otherwise. But they, every time they take away from the focus of the business and me doing the artwork that I want to do. Because if it's a commercial piece, like say a book cover, the considerations and the way I work on it are completely different than if it were something I were just doing on my own. So I made the decision that I was taking a break from any special projects this year. I've already said no to 8, I think. And I also stopped exhibiting my artwork. I did one group show. It was at Mission 356 here in Los Angeles, which it's no longer there, but it was Laura Owens. She invited me to be in a group show there, which I said yes to enthusiastically. But it's for me, my artwork has to be the thing that there's no consideration of what somebody else wants or expects it to be.
Mm-hmm.
And so for about, and I thought for a while, it's like, well, maybe I'll take a break and just do that for a year. And I think I'm going on my fifth year now of
Oh,
doing my artwork without selling it, without showing it. I actually, for the first time, I had a really good friend of mine. Do you remember Domi Books?
yeah. What was her name? Magda?
Magda, I don't know Magda. Oh, I know here. Yes, I'm thinking of Russell, who ran the bookstore.
Oh, okay, okay.
He lives out here now. He's actually the director of the bookstore at the Marciano Foundation. And
Oh, okay.
Russell's great, and I had Russell over. I hadn't seen him in a long time, and he's the first person I've had over where I said, "Here's the body of artwork I'm working on right now. I want to talk to you about it, and I want you to look at it and tell me what you think." And so having that separate from no deadline, it really, I think that is, I've found for me, like if a gallery comes to me and says, we're going to have a group show and this is the theme and we need a piece by this time, I don't do good work. It becomes work and I don't enjoy it. I don't feel as free creating it. I get really stressed out about delivering on time. And so a lot of the last few years has been about just this process of kind of shedding any deadlines, and I'm fortunate that I have a business that I can focus on that will let me do that. Because there certainly was a time where I didn't feel like I could afford to. It's like, we want to do this commercial illustration. And I was like, yeah, I need to take that. I need the exposure. I want the experience. I need the money. I always need the money. It's just that I'm focused more on generating that money from coming out of my own business as opposed to chasing down freelance projects.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, it's definitely hard. I mean, I'm using the term art for myself in air quotes, but I have discussions with a lot of people who do, creative content work like I do. I get hired by a company and they want a certain project, and it's like, it has to be in the parameters of what they want and not exactly what you want. Like in my case, I'm like having to, take an extra layer of glitter and a couple pom-poms off to make it, more consumable. But like I get it. It's nice to have that separate thing that's like, I'm gonna do it on my terms, on my time. Like I'm gonna add as many damn pom poms as I want. Nobody can tell me any different. So
Right.
you gotta have that.
Yeah, you do. And there are rare exceptions and like a couple of really, really good examples for me. I did a collaboration with Citizens of Humanity, the jeans company,
Mm-hmm.
and it was a fantastic experience. They're just an incredible company to work with. They work with artists all the time. They do special collaborations. And it was that rare, I can't believe I'm getting to work with this company. I can't believe they're such amazing people. And I can't believe they're going to literally let me do whatever I want. And
The Holy Grail, the trifecta.
Holy Creative Grail. They sent me to Tokyo. It was a special collaboration for a really popular boutique in Tokyo. And it was great. It was fantastic. I did a second collaboration with them that was exclusive for free people. And that was a little bit different. It was just as great. It's exhausting. It's an unbelievable amount of work. But I learned so much from doing it. So after the Citizens Project for Rosebud in Tokyo, I did a big blog post, and I don't blog as much as I used to, but I really wanted to devote the time and space to talking about this project. And the point that I wanted to get across was, how you hear about all of these artists getting ripped off by big companies or clothing companies. Well, here's a story of when that didn't happen and what it looks like. And I really wanted people to see the results of that and what that could look like, and also know that about Citizens, for one thing, because they deserve the kudos for that. The other one that I had a really good experience with, although it was one of the hardest things I've ever done in my life, is I did embroidery kits for Restoration Hardware for their seasonal. Every Christmas they have extra, kind of gifty things. I did embroidery kits for them for 3 years in a row. And they they were incredible to work with. And one of the things that it was really, really hard because there are such requirements when you're dealing with that sort of volume. I think the first one we did 3,000 kits.
Dang.
Everything has to be labeled to their specifications. Everything has to be packed a certain way. And that's not something that you figure out in a day. It took weeks and spreadsheets and making sure that you have everything. And that is for their warehouse receiving, which is something, as I'm sure a lot of your listeners, even if you deal with a smaller business, they may have certain warehousing requirements. It has to be labeled this way. This number has to be on the outside. So just take that times 100. And so that was incredibly challenging. But what was so great about working with them was that they had, at least at the time, this was several years ago, I don't know if it's changed, but they had a separate contract that was for artisans like me that basically said, we know you are not a giant operation, and we're going to take away some of the layers that would probably be impossible for you to deal with so that we can make this happen. And I was really impressed by that. I really, really liked working with them, and I really liked that they acknowledged the challenges that a smaller creator or creative designer has so that they can actually make it possible and have something unique in their store.
Well, good for you for spreading the happy gospel. It's like a Yelp review, you only write them when you're like angry, and you never write a Yelp review and you're like, God, that person went above and beyond and was like so nice. Like the world needs more like stories like that. Like not everybody's an a-hole. Some people are really awesome.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. I'm a big believer in that. Of course, you're always inspired to go type angrily. Then you're like, I'm so happy. I'm going to sit down and type up a nice.
Exactly. I'm too busy skipping through the rainbows to type a good review right now. But so, when we were out there and I was with my friend Stacy and we went and had, Rice Krispie milkshakes,
Oh, that's right.
we one of the things we were talking about, and this ties into what you're talking about, was art licensing, which I am like no clue about. So now, is that what it's called? I'm going to sound like such a novice and uneducated in this field by asking this, but are you licensing the art from those other artists? Like say you're new in with Mary Blair. Is that what it is? Like you get an art licensing contract?
Yes, it depends because some artists, so for example, Mary Blair is no longer with us. So it is through her estate, and they have an agent that licenses her work. So, so it depends on the artist. Some artists have agents, and if I were to approach them directly, they might say, that's great, I would love to do it. Here's my agent, go talk to them. Although more often than not, almost all the artists, I think all but maybe one, I work with them directly. And I have my own licensing contract. And I've had the same one for years. I think it's changed a little bit. And what I do is, it's a whole process. It's like, hey, I really love your work. I would love to add you to the Sublime Stitching catalog. Are you interested? They come back and say, yes, tell me more. And then I have a long email I send to them that says, this is how it works. And I'm going to be sending you a contract, but this is what the contract asks for. And the things that just so your listeners know, like, and this contract was drafted by me and a lawyer at the time because I wanted it to reflect, first of all, I wanted it to be a solid contract. And I also wanted it to contain certain things that I wanted. And it's never my goal when I'm working with an artist or an illustrator that they don't know what the expectations are, or it's something that they don't want. So meaning we agree on compensation, we agree on what the work ends up looking like. I always show, I try to always show them. Sometimes it gets off to the printers beforehand, but it's really important to me that they see the work and feels that it represents their work well. For example, in my contracts, in the email that I send to my artists, it says, you're going to be getting a contract, but I just want to highlight these points. Like I will let artists, they don't have to create new artwork for me. They can if they want, but I want to make it as easy as possible for them. So very often it's like, you won't have to do anything. You can give me existing artwork. I will do the interpretation of the patterns, and it's artwork that you can continue to use for anything else that you want. The only thing that I ask that is exclusive is I ask that they work with me exclusively to interpret their work as embroidery patterns for hand embroidery. So meaning any artwork, so that they won't, I want to have exclusive rights to their artwork for embroidery patterns, so that they next year don't go to another pattern company and they're like, hey, we're doing patterns with them too. It's pretty simple, it's a revolutionary idea. But I always want people to know that that's my expectation. And I've never had, people are great. And I think one of the things that I've learned, especially working with artists who license their work a lot, I've worked with artists that don't license their work very much. And I've worked with artists that's all they do. That's their whole career. And I found that the ones that do it the most are the ones that are the most flexible. And I think that directly relates to why there's so much of their work out there. And it doesn't mean that it's not protected. It doesn't mean that it's just getting ripped off or they're getting taken advantage of. They have found this really great happy medium of not being, and it took me a really long time for my own work to get to this place of, I used to get real upset about money. I was offered to do something and I'd be huffing around going like, why are they offering me this? My husband teases me. He's like, remember, don't they know who I am? And I'm like, yes, I know. And I'm super, super full of myself. And I'm just like, I should be commanding this price right now. Why are they even offering you this? And you just get over it. And you're like, yeah, either you want to do it or you don't. And you start to understand what people realistically are being paid for what they're doing. And so just a long way of saying that, that I hope, for those listening, that I think you have to be if you want to be licensing your work, if you want to get your work out there, I'm not saying give up something you don't want to, but I think that it's given me a great perspective on how it works, being on both sides of it. As an artist,
you got to be able to give and take, I think.
That's right. And seeing how they, that I'm an artist who I license my work, I know what my expectations are, but then also dealing with those who do it far more than I do and how they handle it. It's very interesting.
It makes me think of, I know you've done patterns with Heidi for My Paper Crane.
Yes.
And I'm sure her being like reasonable and delightful and easy to work with is probably one of the reasons she has embroidery patterns and kid robot things and plushies at Target that your kid wants and, end caps at Barnes and Nobles.
Yeah, exactly. And I went to DCon out here a few years ago, Designer Con, and I went specifically because I wanted to look for new people to work with. And I walked the whole floor. And then I got my cards ready and I was like, all right, now I'm going back and I'm going to hit everybody whose work I was really excited about that I wanted to work with. And I must have given out 10 cards. And I very specifically asked them to contact me. I didn't say, is it okay if I contact you? I told them who I was. I said, this is what I do. Here's a pack of patterns. I love your work. If you'd be interested in doing something like this, let me know. Here's my card. Send me an email. And I think out of 10 people, one contacted me. And so that, for me, that's also a big thing is like, even if there was somebody other than who contacted me that I would have just died to have their work, if they don't want to work with me, if they're not excited about it, I want to focus on something else. I move on.
You're not going to hunt them down.
No, I've learned that it just doesn't work. It doesn't end up being a good project. And if they're not excited about it, and that goes both ways, if I have, I've been asked to do something and then they'll kind of like hem and haw about what we want to do. And then they don't sound really excited about it. And I'm thinking, well, I want to work with you if you're excited to work with me.
Mm-hmm.
If we're going to start carving this down and cutting it back in a way that doesn't make sense, then maybe I'm not the person for this project, and that's fine. And then the person who contacted me, we did a ton of stuff together. We did 2 sheets of patterns. We did a tool case. We did a needle minder. Her name's Naoshi. And
I love her stuff, by the way.
I love her stuff. Her work is, it's so fantastic. And
It's so cute.
it's so cute. She does for your listeners, she does these worlds of little people, and it's kind of like little girls in these fantasy lands with even tinier people around them with like maybe candy heads, and it's hard to explain. You just have to see her work.
But it's amazing, like little bubbly bob haircuts, and
It's really clean lines, and it's all sand. A lot of it's sand art.
interesting.
That's her thing, is that she's very, it's this Japanese sand art. So a lot of the work, when you see it online, you can't tell because it just looks like an illustration. But it's actually like super, super fine sand adhered to wood. And she even does little kits that you can get her cutouts, and comes with little bags of this super fine sand. Her stuff is great. But she's been wonderful. She heavily promoted it, and it's fun. It's great. I love that. I really, those are things that, it's nice, Jennifer, when you make friends.
Right. See, you're just like the Restoration Hardware and the Citizens for all those people. You're just paying it forward.
Yeah, I love it. I like promoting their work and coming together and making something that other people can play with their artwork in a way that maybe they couldn't or didn't think of doing before. Yeah, I love it.
I'd love it too. I know I need to get her kit. Now I want one of those sand kits. I want her embroidery kit and her sand kits.
Yeah, sand kits are cool.
I should have stolen one out of your studio while I was there. Not that I would have had to stolen it. I know you would have given it to me. So, you work with all these other designers. You do your own stuff. Like you have like a gazillion products now in your store. And I know you've dabbled with working with other people through the years and all those kinds of things. And you've done manufacturing things and had people that did order fulfillment. So do you outsource anything like that anymore? Or are you all like a one-woman show these days?
I am back to being almost a one-woman show. So when I started Sublime Stitching, obviously it was just me. And then I had an assistant. I had a string of just, helpers that came by the house and would help me pack orders. And the first person who was really there, like on a solid timetable, was a grad student from the law school at UT, and Aman. His name was Aman. Aman was wonderful. I love Aman. He worked for me for about a year, and he said he loved the work because it was so relaxing compared to his law school homework. But I had people like that, kind of catch as catch can for a while. The most I ever had on my payroll was 5 people. And then over the years I would have, 1 or 2, and people would work for me for a long time, for like, 2 years, 3 years. And right now, I made the decision last year, after various attempts at kind of trying to scale up. People always talk about, like, I want to scale up my business.
Uh-huh.
And for me, I'd reached a point where I thought, okay, I'm actually ready to try and scale up with a staff again. And I just quickly learned that in my heart of hearts, it's not what I wanted, because I don't want to manage people. And there is simply no getting around it. If you have an employee, even if it's one employee, you have to manage them. Mm-hmm. And I always was saying, when I would do interviews, I would always say how much I really liked when my business had been at a size where it was just me, and it was at a size where I could do all of it myself. And I found that in the last year, I kind of took a step back and I said, am I in this sweet spot right now where the business is established enough? I could not have possibly gotten at this point or level without having had employees. But could I do this all by myself now? Like, is it dialed in enough? And let me try that. And, yeah, I fill
Mhm.
orders for 4 hours every day, but I love doing that. Filling orders is the most
You see what Amon
yeah,
found,
exactly. Yeah,
relaxing about it?
yes, exactly. I mean, and so so right now, my husband works with me on the business a very little bit, just consulting, not, not like filling orders. And he's wonderful. I really, really value his input. He has a great perspective on it. Um, but every day it's me answering emails, packing orders, inventory management, which I really like that because that is a hard thing to teach somebody else to do. Like, how can you know by looking on the shelf that that is getting low and it's time to order it again because it's going to take 3 weeks from that vendor to get it? Um,
Mhm.
and I work with, so when you say one woman show, I'm like, yeah, but I work with like 30 vendors and I work with somebody who I give her a lot of my raw inventory and she assembles it for me. Like I've always had that. I've always had somebody
Mhm.
that was not somebody who came in every day, but somebody who worked on the side where they would assemble my kits. I give them, and that in and of itself is a hard job, not just the assembly, but preparing for the assembler. Like that was one of the hardest
Mhm.
things that you wouldn't even think about. That when I would hire someone, saying, okay, they're going to need 20 of these, 40 of those because two go in that, and this packaging and that. It's a lot. So
Mhm.
it's a lot of moving parts, but I really enjoy paying attention to all of it. It's
And nobody's gonna pay attention to your business like you will.
and do you tell yourself this, Jen? I always tell myself, like, if I had to get a job, I'd be the best employee because I just know what an employer wants. I know, isn't that silly? But I think that sometimes I'm like, I bet I just be the best employee now because I know what they want. I know what their expectations are. That's who I am.
They just cheer for me at the water cooler, I'd be the best.
Right? Um, but I really, really enjoy. It's less stressful for me because I know it's getting done. I love doing customer service. I love emailing with my customers. As you know, I can't do it all the time, but I answer all of my emails, everyone, and
Mhm.
that's super important to me. It's important to me not just that they get that contact. I mean, that's really what my that was the thing that made me want to do Sublime Stitching was getting emails from people saying, I love this. It's made me really happy. And that made me happy.
Mhm.
And at a time when things in my life were incredibly difficult, my dad was very sick. I was answering customer service emails from uh, hospital library in Arkansas. And to go down from an ICU unit, go into a hospital library, log on, and get emails from strangers saying, I just got a pack of patterns and I love them. It carried me through that. And
Yeah.
it becomes a thing that you're like, well, this is the best. What's better than that? It's wonderful. I love having all this contact with this many people through embroidery this way.
And bringing people that happiness.
Yeah. I mean, I don't want to be, I've never wanted to be like, I'm here because I want to make your life better, but that's always been kind of like my secret thing, which is like, I just get really excited about embroidery. And it's like, yeah, I just want like love and stuff. I want
Aw.
people to
Well,
be
good for you.
nice and me to, work on being nice to you. Cause believe me, it's taken years to like, I know what this is like. It's very rare. I'm very lucky. It's very rare that I get snarky emails. I mean, I'll get like one a year, and
Yeah.
it doesn't even have to be snarky when you start your business and you are first dealing with people as customers, and that first email they send to you where they're like, I got this thing and I was disappointed. You're on the defensive. They're expecting you to not do anything about it. And I learned early on how quickly you can turn that around. And it's been good for me. I'm like,
Mhm.
okay, how can I practice, being as nice as I can to them, making it right. And then you get the reward of like, they're so relieved that somebody's taking it seriously. They're so happy that they're not getting attitude back. That is just smooth sailing from there.
Exactly. You can, like, overcompensate and then make them into, like, super customers
That's
because
right. That's right.
y yeah, they thought you were gonna, like, do the wrong thing, and then when you do the right thing, not only are they surprised, they're like, "What? Now I extra love you."
That's right. And so it's a little bit mercenary, but it's definitely been like, for me, I'm going, I'll be a better person and I'll have less aggravated days for sure if I can, you know, keep a cool head and I can deal with it. And it's just, that has been absolutely one of the most enriching aspects of my business has been just the communicating with customers every day.
Oh, good. Yeah, I'm finding that with the podcast. Like, you get those like special like reviews or emails, and you're just like, oh, you're just like, you're making me get misty. I wanted to go back real quick talking about like scaling because one of the things I thought was so interesting when I was there and we were hanging out is you mentioned that you'd kind of purposely brought it down to just you. And, I feel like we're in this society now with all these, like, everybody's like a boss babe and a this and a that. And it's like, you somehow get all these stars on your chart if are scaling and you're always busy and you've got like this many employees. But it's like, you could have all of those things and you have this big successful business, but you just like are self confident enough in your work to know, like, you know what? I want it to just be me. Like, I don't want to be wrapped up with 15 employees if I don't have to be. And I just don't think a lot of people realize that, like, if you don't want to be huge, if Gary Vaynerchuk is saying, like, you need to be huge, that doesn't mean you have to be if that's not what makes you happy and your business happy. Like, if you're content and love it the way it is, then keep it the way it is. You don't need to, scale it and sell it and blah, 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 all those things.
Absolutely. And I think that there's a lot of, I thought the same things. I think there are a lot of ideas around that the real story of what that feels like and how it shakes out is not what you think it's going to be. And meaning like what it means to work with another company, what it would mean if a company, like let's say a giant corporation comes to me and says, we want to buy Sublime Stitching. I would probably say no. I mean, I'd talk to them about it first, but the essentially what that is we want to become your boss. Well, I started this because I don't want a boss. I want to do what I want to do. And independence is number one with me. It's just about maintaining my independence and being able to do what I want, for better or for worse. I make mistakes. But when I really hit it, I get to own that. And that's really important to me. And, and just honestly, I'm just somebody who I like to work by myself. I'm happy by myself. I like being alone in my studio. I like listening to my music. I don't work well with other people around. It's very hard for me to concentrate. I'm an introvert, Jen. It's just, by all appearances.
Yeah, and you know what? There's nothing wrong with that. No. I mean, I am too. Like, I'm extroverted, but I like to work by myself. I like it quiet. I like my noise canceling headphones on. Like, I don't want Chris coming in telling me about this hilarious thing he saw on Facebook. Like,
yeah, it's too disruptive. And, I'm not shy. Obviously, I like to talk. I do like to meet people, but I have to have, especially when I'm writing, when I'm working, and really when I'm just concentrating on Sublime Stitching, I just doesn't, for me, mix well with, like, people love to brainstorm with me about Sublime Stitching, and I find it really stressful. It's like, yeah, actually, I've already got so much going on in my head that, just, hey, let's have a free-for-all. What if we did this or that? It just makes me feel super anxious. And so I think, I agree with that. I think, we're in an age where everything is about people putting out an image of what they're doing and how they're doing it for everyone to compare themselves to. And that's hard. I can't imagine if I were a teenager with Instagram going on. I think it's, and I'm the same. I mean, I post the prettiest picture of the corner of my studio that I can. And at the same time, I always want people to know of like, yeah, but there's a mess right beyond the edge of the phone. Or I'm stressed out about stuff. And that's always been important to me because I know you've, ever since there was such a focus on giving advice on how to start our independent businesses, from the get-go, especially through Kraft Mafia. And I don't know if you felt this way. I think you did. I think we all felt like, I never wanted to be this, yes, just go for it and quit your day job and it's all going to work out, because I felt like that was really bad advice. I thought the best advice you could give is, this is what it's really going to be like. And by the way, I don't even know because I'm still just starting. And I feel like, 18 years in now, I'm really only now starting to seriously reap the benefits of the things that I've learned. Like it's taken me this long to finally be like, okay, I get it. That doesn't work. I must stop putting my attention on that. This is the thing that works. And I still focus on dumb stuff just because I want to, even though it's like, no, that's not it. But yeah.
But you're like, but I want it to be it. I'm going to make it be it.
Yeah, that's right. And I think, I don't know. Do you think that's what people's goals are? That they like, I'm going to have a big staff under me, or I'm going to be, I
don't know. It depends on the genre. Since I kind of have, with the podcast and just kind of in life, I've always had, kind of 1 foot in the DIY world and then 1 foot in the business world. I've always loved like, you know what I mean? I might be reading like Grace Bonney's like Good Company, but I'm also reading like Inc. and Fortune Small Business or whatever. I don't even know if those are around anymore, but you know what I mean? Both of those things. And so I guess too, it kind of depends which podcast I'm listening to or what Facebook group I'm in as to whether, because a lot of the small business ones, like say Gold Digger or something, or Amy Porterfield, or, the businessy podcast, the businessy people, they're always talking about like, how to make 7 figures doing this and this with a drip campaign and teaching this online class. And it's always like, about like the making the money, I don't know. I don't get it as much with the DIY community that it's just like, you must be giant. But I do kind of hear it from the other end, from the small business ladies end.
I feel like the issue that I hear people still wrestling with that is kind of a 'twas ever thus thing is how they're making a living on things that they actually make by hand, and to manage the volume and to command the price would require that, that is hard. I feel like that is really, really hard to do.
Oh, it's so hard. And like you have already, like something that's done. I can't imagine, like, occasionally I'll sell vintage on Etsy. And if you don't ship it in like one day, they're so used to Amazon and, things so fast that they're just like, where is it? Like, what, have you shipped it? And it's like, well, no, I can't imagine if it was something I was hand making and custom making.
That's very true. And I actually today, let's see, I've got one order from Monday. I really try to ship everything the next day. It's not always possible, but I really try to ship things out as fast as I can. But it's true. People, I'm used to this. It's like Amazon. You get it, 10 minutes ago, and and they have the same expectation. It's funny that you mentioned Etsy because I have an Etsy shop now, which I didn't. I've had an Etsy account since 2005, since they started, but I wasn't allowed to have an Etsy store at the time because I didn't technically hand make what I was selling.
Oh, interesting.
They didn't allow anything yet. And so it's grown over the years where they say, okay, now we allow suppliers or people that do publishing, or, now they let people sell anything on there, it seems. And I have noticed that there is a very different type of customer on Etsy than the customer I get with my website. They have different expectations. There's much more of I'll call it a Yelpy attitude where they know they can leave a review. So they kind of have this little more entitled, slightly threatening if it doesn't go the way I want it attitude. So that's, and if you were, I have talked to some people that have big Etsy stores and that's all they have. And they deal with a different, customers with different expectations. And I think that's tough. But just back to your original point of, you got to be happy. You've got to be enjoying it. You just, comparison is the thief of joy. Everything is better than what you're doing on Instagram. I get jealous all the time. I see stuff. I'm like, they're doing cool things and I stink. But, no one's immune to it. I feel that all the time. And I think it takes practice to refocus on what is good for your mental health. And by doing that keeps you focused on you doing your best work. And that's all it is. It's just doing I I hear so much hand wringing. I mean, God knows I've done this. It drove me crazy when people copy your work, when you think they're copying your photo, or they think they're, ripping off your style or whatever. Unless it is like what I went through, where a company literally took my patterns and released a line of clothing with my patterns on it, you just can't give it your energy. You just have to do your work, and that's not easy to do. But that's the secret success sauce. I mean, if there is one, that's it. It's just put your head down, worry about you, do your work. And it took me a long time to get to that place. I was on the warpath all the time because all the time. And there were things that I needed to do that were necessary because I was pretty aggressively getting, I think I had 3 clothing companies put out lines with my patterns on them. And I had to do something about it. I had to protect my trademark. One of them used my trademark. It was nuts.
Yeah, I remember when all that was happening. I mean, I remember when people were using Naughty Secretary Club as a search tag on Etsy, and I was just like, it's not a style.
Right.
Like, it's a brand, people.
Yeah. And the only thing I try to do is like on Instagram is I gently police the Sublime stitching hashtag. And honestly, virtually everybody who uses it, they don't know. They see it tagged somewhere and they don't know that that's because it's tagging my patterns. They think it's just, it's a nice way to talk about embroidering because it is. But, and I just have a little ready to go note that I send people. And I'm like, you probably didn't even know this, but it's trademarked. And it's really just a way for people to identify stuff that's made with my supplies. But yeah, that is a dangerous rabbit hole to go down, and Instagram will feed it to you to the point that you'll never do your work if you pay attention to that all the time. And
yeah, you said it perfect. Like, you just got to pick your battles and put your head down and do the work. So, speaking of Etsy and old school, I don't want to keep you for forever. We're already in an hour, but did you ever advertise in the back of Bust or Venus magazine or any other now defunct magazines?
Have you met me? Yes.
I still have people say that to me. Like, that's how I found out about you.
Yes, I advertised in Bus Shop. I advertised in Venus. I also advertised in Punk Planet. I advertised in Love and Rocket's comic book. And actually, my very first print ad was in Juxtapose.
Oh, that's a good place for you. Oh, and Ready Made. We used to do that one, too.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, Ready Made.
It's like, magazines are falling off. I'm like, I was trying to think, like, who did we used to do? All right, so I'm going to end with the same question I ask everybody, but for you, it's a little different. Do you miss Queso in Austin, or have you found good stuff there in LA?
I have not found as good stuff in LA, and I'm going to give a massive shout out to Curra's in Austin because I miss Curra's. There is nothing here that is good as Curra's, and I miss Curra's mole.
Oh, yeah. Gosh, their everything is good. They have those like avocado margaritas. I don't even drink anymore and I want one of those.
Avocado margaritas. When I go, and when I was in Austin last fall, and I was there for like 24 hours, I think, I was meeting a friend of mine and I said, I only have a few hours. We can have breakfast, but I'm having breakfast at Curra's. And what I get is sometimes I get a Tecate. And I get huevos sucios, with an extra side of white cheese, crumbled bacon, and then I sit there and I just roll. I roll little breakfast tacos for myself. It's heaven. It's heaven. It's the best.
Yum. I do. I love their Conchita Pibil. Now I'm like hungry. Now I'm like, I want to go to Curra's for dinner.
I wish I could. I would.
All right. I'll FaceTime you. I'll go eat it and I'll FaceTime
you. Mole smile.
Exactly. This bite's for you. Well, Jenny, thank you so much for coming by and hanging out and talking to me, reminiscing.
Thank you, Jen. It's been super fun. It's really, really nice to talk to you again after all these years.
I know. I've loved it.
Thanks so much.
And I'll talk to you soon, okay?
Okay, take care.
Okay,
bye.
Bye. Boom. That is the sound of Jenny Hart dropping some serious small creative business knowledge bombs. I told you that woman was wise. 18 years of running a successful company will do that for a person. Find Jenny at sublimestitching.com and at Sublime Stitching on Instagram. I'll put links to everything we chatted about in the show notes over at creativequeso.com. You know, there is more than one way to embroider. Sublime Stitching specializes in hand embroidery, but are you familiar with chain stitch embroidery? Over on creativequeso.com, this week's Taco About It Tuesday is with Tina Vines. Tina runs a company called Vines of the West, specializing in Western and vintage-inspired chain stitch embroidery. Her sewing machine is over 100 years old, and she gets busy with it, customizing everything from felt handbags to circle skirts. I loved her surprising piece of trivia about herself, so don't miss the interview and be sure to follow at Tina_Vines on Instagram. Listening to podcasts and doing handiwork like embroidery is the perfect combo. Go grab yourself some Sublime stitching patterns. She even has downloadable versions. And go back through the Creative Queso archives where you can listen to me chat with our other fellow Kraft Mafia member, Vicky Howe, art teacher extraordinaire Cassie Stevens, who you might have seen on the new season of Netflix's Nailed It, or Nicole Stevenson of Dear Handmade Life. Thanks so much for hanging out and listening. If you're happy and you know it, you can clap your hands too. But after listening, go ahead and hit the subscribe button, why don't you? And if you're really happy, you could also rate, review, and share. You know, I totally wouldn't be mad at that. Shout out to my producer, Mariah Gossett, and to Chris Beck for the music. And I'll see y'all next week, same time, same place. Bye.